Episode 12 in our Real World series is a curation episode in which our team edits the results of yesterday's meeting after a day of reflection. But first, an overview of the generic weighted sum scoring method. What's unique is ThinkSheet's common measurement system in yellow fonts at right that enables users to score their data in numbers and judgments in any language in a consistent way, making your data and judgments apples to apples for comparison purposes. For now, we are only doing the catalyst, risk, and X factors in the qualitative model, making it simpler to see that users are the source of both the judgments language and the scores between 1 and 0, and ThinkSheet then generates the weighted sum. Here is the scoring history of the base case. Caveat: we are still in the early testing stage, so these histories only have minimal value. Everyone will become better at telling the story, scoring the judgments, and ranking the countries over time. The average scores are in the right column. China first at 52, US second at 24, and EU last at minus 42. Scores above 60 highlighted in green and below 60 in red. The bottom score is the all-important movement of the scores from episode to episode, with the 80% negative move being the highest and the average move 13. We keep referencing the three analogies because deepening your understanding of what's unique about ThinkSheet will accelerate your mastery of the modeling process. First, the Google AltaVista analogy. AltaVista was a purely computerized search engine. The Google insight was that humans are far better than computers at clicking on the most efficient links to find their target website. So Google scored the links and then used the algorithms to aggregate them. In effect, it added human intelligence as an indirect source to the scoring process. The MD Anderson analogy is that ThinkSheet added professionals to the scoring process by making them, like the MD Anderson oncologists, direct sources of the judgments and the scores. The smartphone analogy is that the ThinkSheet benefits, qualitative plus quantitative analysis, one-pages plus AI, are exponentially greater than those of current conventional and AI analytics without the ThinkSheet enhancement. The CNFG focus stocks this week are Apple, Tesla, and Microsoft. This supply chain and tech combination view makes it much easier to make the right judgments for both risks because they are highly connected, as Chris pointed out about full self-driving EVs requiring both the most advanced chips and batteries. Requiring both the most advanced chips and the most advanced batteries. The historical models have the date at top left and the forecast date at top right. We are curating yesterday's model with cumulative score of 20 and 35% probability. The 3D view of yesterday's model makes it easy to see the drivers at a glance, the green positives and red negatives, and the spreads, like the 58-point spread between the US and EU catalysts, and then iterate through what-if analysis at speed of thought. Everyone can compare the judgments and scores vertically, like the US and China catalyst, horizontally, like the China catalyst and X factors, and diagonally, like the US catalyst versus China X factors. Combinations, like the catalyst and risk for the US and EU, with a 107-point difference between the US catalysts of China competitors, CHIPS Act, No Wingnuts Congress, and only US-China risk, compared to EU judgments of Ukraine cohesion, need to minimize China trade loss and decline in German industry, and above average risk for US-China supply chains and technology, of a total 137-point difference. So compared to what? What are you looking at in meetings when what ifing the qualitative and your thought process as a whole? With a think sheet one pager, you see your judgments, stories, and scores at a glance, and your whole thought process, qualitative and quantitative if you choose, and can iterate through what if at speed of thought and see the consequences instantly, as opposed to trying to synthesize it all in your head, often with major miscommunications among people on the team because they can't see the cause and effect. Let's look at the model edits. Added Chris Miller, a Tufts professor, as Think Sheets Chips thought later, based on his book Chips War, the fight for the world's most critical technology, the Financial Times Book of the Year, and frequent interviews on the subject. Next, China Catalyst, underline COVID for new set of problems from zero COVID pivot, massive population in crowded cities. Next, China Catalyst, underline COVID for new set of problems from zero COVID pivot, massive population in crowded cities, many unvaccinated elderly, ineffective homegrown vaccines, and untrustworthy data, minimizing the real level of cases and seriousness. Changing China competitor to China exceptional. On expectations that U.S. will change to a more realistic China narrative that acknowledges its exceptionalism in terms of economic, geopolitical, and military growth, and positive reputation among numerous countries outside of the U.S., the West, and Japan. False narratives are counterproductive, illustrated by the Saudis and Arab world embrace of China last week in Riyadh. Bolded Taiwan in red in X factors for US and China because there is almost nothing that could have greater impact on the world today than a Chinese invasion of Taiwan. Bolded India for US X factor because it is the most important swing country in the world today as a US ally.